Hello, book clubberinos. I'm Megan. You know me, kind of. And this is the Outlander recap for chapters 11 through 15, which is all of or most of part 3, part of part 3. Yeah, I'm a little bit discombobulated today. It's been a day already. Anyway, so let's do a quick recap. Before we move on to our questions for the week. Okay, so chapter 11 sees Jamie, Claire, and Dougal and a whole bunch of Mackenzie kinsmen. That's kind of hard to say that 5 times fast. Set out to visit the villages on Mackenzie land for people who couldn't make it to the gathering. Collect their taxes, rent, money, things that they're owed. And Claire finds herself riding next to Ned Gowan, who turns out to be Colum's solicitor and kind of like the official attorney for the clan. And he's very much a Mackenzie, pro Mackenzie. Let's put it that way. He will always kind of fight on their side, right? And so they start talking, and he's a nice man. He's older, and he talks about how he came to be where they are up in the Highlands, and he kind of takes the opportunity to sort of probe Claire, and kind of suggest that she can confide in him, and it's kind of like Ned's not very good at this. It's kind of clear that he did this kind of on the orders of Colum. So still trying to kind of glean information from Claire in kind of roundabout ways, trying to poke holes in her story, trying to kind of figure out who she is and what she's doing there, right? And Claire's like, I don't think I'm going to be sharing too much information with you, right? So after a couple of days, Claire discovers that Dougal is a Jacobite, and he is raising money to support the cause. And his primary way of doing this is to use Jamie's back, which, as you recall, at this point, he was flogged, and his back is severely scarred from his 2 floggings, as kind of an exhibition. And Jamie's not real happy about it, and Claire is like, oh, this isn't right. But when she confronts him about it, Dougal sort of uses his role as war chief to take advantage of the situation. Though Jamie points out to him that Colum has no idea that he's doing this, and it doesn't really sound like Colum would support it if he knew. So it's kind of clear that Dougal is kind of doing this on the DL. But left with no other option, it seems like Jamie kind of continues to tolerate being a bit of a freak show. And it's just kind of he's not happy about it, but he doesn't feel like he can get out of it anyway. And Claire kind of calls him out on it too, or calls Dougal out on it too. So that's kind of where we end at the end of chapter 11. And then there is a line that I think is just entertaining. She says, Murtaugh was one of those men who always looked a bit startled to find that women had voices, which I think kind of sums up Murtaugh in a nice little shell. And I think that kind of throughout all the books, the interactions that Claire has with Murtaugh kind of prove that kind of are constantly making Murtaugh rethink women in general. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. Okay, so then chapter 12 is called The Garrison Commander. We all know who that is. So Claire kind of spends a little bit of time pondering exactly what do Dougal and Colum think of her, and she finally decides that they think that she's an English spy. So while staying at the inn, Claire has her own room and an inn. She has her own room, and she's kind of startled when she finds that Jamie is sleeping outside her door. And he says, I'm kind of doing this to protect you, but she's not stupid enough to realize that to not realize that he's also, I mean, he's a wanted man. The English are looking for him, so clearly, you know, he needs to kind of hide too. So you know, that happens, and then the next morning she is taken to meet the garrison commander of Fort William, who turns out to be Jonathan Randall, who is not at all surprised to see her. I guess he kind of put two and two together. I mean, here's the deal. He's, like, as much as I just want him to be like a big dumb brute, the reality is that Jonathan Randall is not a big dumb brute. He's pretty sharp, which is probably one of the reasons why he's given the job of garrison commander. He's still brutal, and he's still really a really bad guy. Actually, we made a popsicle stick of him, of his character. You ready? I'm Jonathan Randall. I'm English, and I'm really crabby all the time. Anyway, so she goes in, and she, like, Dougal talks to him first, and then she goes in to talk to him, and he starts talking, and she kind of lets it slip that she knows he's from Sussex, I think, and he's like, how can you tell that? And she's like, I recognized your accent. So then, of course, he has to, like, check to see if she's really that good. So he, like, has her to try to figure out where this little soldier that's, like, standing guard at the door is from, and she's pretty close. So he kind of gives her a pass on that. Although we really know that she knows where he's from because of all of Frank's research that he did on him. So he starts talking, and she once again explains her story of how she got to be where she is. And then he proceeds to, like, not just poke holes in her story, like, massively rip her story to shreds. And he says, you know, we didn't find anybody dead. We didn't find, you know, any horses that were wandering around. You know, none of these things. We don't, like, your story doesn't add up. And she's left a little bit, like, doesn't really know what to do. And then she just kind of becomes, like, this kind of hand-wavy, like, look, you would really be helping me, like, really, does any of this matter? Like, you know, and he gets really nasty with her. So so she's not a spy for Randall. So who is she, right? So, you know, Dougal had told Randall that he suspected that she was an English spy, and he's like, not mine. So who are you exactly? And in typical Randall fashion, he just punches her in the stomach, and his whole demeanor is just this very nonchalant, like, he goes around punching people in the stomach all the time, and just nothing. And so just before she passes out, and it should be pointed out that this is, like, the first time that Claire has passed out, with the exception of when she traveled through the stones. And he says, have you anything to say to me now, madam? And she says, your wig is crooked, and then she passes out. So even right before she loses consciousness, she's still kind of being sarcastic. So anyway, then chapter 13, a marriage is announced. So Dougal collects her, and they ride off, and Dougal is really not, like, he's a little bit shocked at how she was treated by Randall, and so he takes her to St. Ninian's spring, and she drinks some water, which she says kind of has a sulfury kind of taste to it. And while they're sitting at the saint's pool, and she's kind of gathering her wits about her, Dougal tells her the story of the events that led up to Jamie's being flogged, about how he was arrested and brought to Fort William and tried to escape. And so he was flogged for trying to, I think this is how it goes. He was flogged for trying to escape. And then in the process of trying to escape, he was found with food on himself. And so it was decided that he would be flogged again for the food. I might have that wrong. Anyway, the point is that he's flogged once, and then about a week later, he is flogged again, and it's nasty. So Claire's kind of like, why are you telling me all this? I mean, it's a really nasty story and all that, but, why are you telling me this? And then Dougal tells her that he has been ordered to present Claire to Fort William on June the 18th, which is about a week away. The only way he can see around it is to make her a Scot by having her marry a Scotsman. And he suggests Jamie. And Claire is understandably not happy about this. And she's kind of, like, I'm married. Like, according to her, she's a widow in this century, but in reality, she's married to Frank back in 1946. But Dougal kind of just waves away her protests. And then he also says, I don't think you're a spy. I don't know what you are, but I don't think that you're a spy. So later on, she talks to Jamie. He's not exactly fully opposed to the marriage. So Ned draws up the contract and it's signed, and Claire goes and gets drunk. So I don't necessarily blame her. So then we get to chapter 14, where a marriage takes place. There's a lot of stuff in this. So she wakes up. She basically passes out in like a drunken stupor, and they put her to bed. She wakes up, and the innkeeper's wife is prepping her for her wedding day because they didn't waste any time whatsoever. And a while later, an actual wedding dress appears. So that's kind of new and different. And then, so she comes downstairs, and then Jamie appears, and he's in full Scottish regalia, including his own plaid, which Dougal says, is that a good idea? Because you're kind of a wanted man. And he's like, I'm going to be married under my plaid. That's just how it is. And tells Claire his actual real name. So, hello, we're not marrying Jamie McTavish, thank God. We are marrying James Fraser. And so they head to the church, which turns out to be the exact same church that Claire married Frank in, if that isn't strange turn of events. They get married, they say a blood oath, Claire faints again. And then Jamie points out to her that it's not legally binding until it's consummated. And Dougal makes it very clear that he expects that to happen. It's a good chapter. I enjoy that chapter. Murtaugh appears at the beginning of the chapter, staring disapprovingly at me from the foot of the bed. Murtaugh's just a generally disapproving kind of person. Ned appears and is kind of the same way. And then chapter 15 is Revelations of the Bridal Chamber. And so they go back and, it's awkward. Like, it's uncomfortable to read even. But they spend a great deal of time just drinking wine and talking about their lives and how they were brought up and their families and their personal experiences. He tells her about his family, which is extensive, because his father had a lot of half siblings as well. And then of course Dougal and Colum are his uncles on his mother's side, but of course his mother is dead. She also had two sisters, Janet, who is also dead, but his auntie Jocasta, who married a cousin of Rupert's and lives up near the edge of Loch Eileen. Now, we're going to meet Jocasta again, or we're actually going to meet her at some point in one of the later books. And she has married multiple times, like 2 or 3 times, I think. And we find out just a little bit more about the Mackenzie side of the family, which is kind of interesting. So Jocasta has three three girls. Dougal has four, even though we've only met two of them. And then, of course, Colum has Hamish. And then, of course, there's Jamie and his sister, Janet, but we call her Jenny. We also find out later that he has a brother who passed away. And then a little bit, about his grandfather. So Brian Fraser has two sets of half-brothers and half-sisters as well. So that's complicated. And you kind of learn about how Brian Fraser and, is it Ellen? I think her name was Ellen. Mackenzie kind of got together. And they weren't really pleased, about her family was not happy about it at all. Claire tells him about her parents dying when she was very young and being orphaned, and how she was brought up by her uncle as well, who, I don't think she explicitly says that he was an archaeologist or a paleontologist or whatever, but she does kind of let him know that her upbringing was very unorthodox. So then, after they've talked for a couple of hours, they finally get around to consummating the marriage, which is kind of a big deal. And, that's kind of I'm not going to say the whole rest of the chapter, but, most of it. Yeah, so that's it. So, anyway, that's it. So let's go over the questions real quickly, and then we'll call it a day. So, question 1. Dougal's exploitation of Jamie's flogging to stir public support for the Jacobites is clearly manipulative. Dougal, however, is a complex character, and even Jamie has a profoundly mixed feelings about him, which I think makes sense because, Jamie spent a couple of years at Castle Leoch when he was younger. So he has a relationship with Dougal and Colum more than what we see here. Do you think there's any justification for what Dougal is doing to Jamie? Does he understand how humiliating the experience, which Claire significantly calls a crucifixion, is? If Colum were to find out that Dougal was soliciting support for the Jacobites, how do you think that he'd respond? Because I think it's pretty clear at this point that Dougal does not know that this is going down. Number 2, after Randall punches her, Claire's contemptuous response to his question, "Have you anything to say?" is, "Your wig is crooked." When Dougal describes Jamie's great courage and composure during his flogging, he remembers Jamie's insulting, "I'm afraid I'll freeze stiff before you're done talking." Does their insolence to Randall increase or decrease the danger he poses to them? And do you see this verbal daring as heroic? 3. Dougal tells Claire the complete story of the flogging as a way of illustrating Jamie's character to her prior to their marriage. From a purely practical perspective, would Claire have been safer marrying Rupert, as ludicrous as it sounds? Dougal is clearly upset by Randall's brutality to Claire at Brockton, but how much of his scheme can be attributed to the fact that the Mackenzies would never accept a chief whose wife was an Englishwoman? In terms of his own political ambitions, is Dougal killing two birds with one stone here? Despite his Machiavellian instincts, some ancient spirituality lingers in Dougal. Why does he take Claire to St. Ninian's Spring? Chapter number 4. In Chapter 15, Revelations of the Bridal Chamber, the awkwardness of the bride and groom delays the consummation considerably, but also gives them an opportunity to learn more about each other's families and personal experiences. As they sit side by side drinking wine and touching, what important insights do they learn about each other? How important is this ability to talk to each other in their growing relationship? 5. On their wedding night, Jamie says, "I think that respect has room for secrets, but not for lies. Do ye agree?" So, do you agree? Can a good marriage have secrets? 6. Does it bother you that Claire is older than Jamie? Why or why not? Does it matter she is not a virgin, but he is? In what ways does it change/influence their relationship? Anyway, so that's it for this week. Next week we'll be doing, 16 through 20? That sounds right. Which, I don't know what I've done with all my pages. 16 through 20 anyway. So that's it. Questions will be in the comments below. We don't have to stick specifically to these questions. We can, if you guys think of anything else you want to talk about, feel free. Otherwise, I will see you guys next week.